Napoleon Bonaparte was a French military commander and emperor of the French Empire. He rose to power during the French Revolution and through his military genius built an empire stretching from Spain to the steppes of Russia. Napoleon was the leader of the French Republic as first consul from 1799 to 1804, then emperor of the French Empire from 1804 to 1815. Napoleon initiated many reforms that have helped shape the modern world, and is considered one of the greatest military commanders in history. The Napoleonic campaigns are still studied around the world for the Corsican's tactical understanding of the battlefield and his charismatic leadership. The Bonaparte family are of Italian origin. Napoleon's paternal ancestors descended from a minor Tuscan noble family that emigrated to Corsica in the 16th century. When Napoleon turned 9 years old, his family moved to France and he enrolled at a religious school in Autun in January 1779. In May, he transferred with a scholarship to a military academy at Brienne-le-Château. In his youth he was an outspoken Corsican nationalist and supported the state's independence from France. Like many Corsicans, Napoleon spoke and read Corsican and Italian. Napoleon only began learning French in school at the age of around 10. Although he became fluent, he spoke with a distinctive Corsican accent and never learned French spellings. Napoleon would spend the early years of the revolution in Corsica, fighting in a complex three-way struggle among royalists, revolutionaries, and Corsican nationalists. After a falling out with the ruling regime in Corsica, the Bonaparte family fled to Toulon on the French mainland in June 1793. Napoleon rose rapidly in the Republican military after saving the governing French Directory by firing on royalist insurgents. In 1796, he began a military campaign against the Austrians and their Italian allies, scoring decisive victories, and became a national hero. 2 years later, Napoleon would lead a military expedition to Egypt that served as a springboard to political power. He engineered a coup in November 1799 and was declared first consul of the Republic. In 1804, to consolidate and expand his power, he crowned himself Emperor of the French. The coronation of the French Emperor took place at Notre Dame de Paris on the 2nd of December 1804. 2 crowns were used for the ceremony, a golden laurel wreath representing the Roman Empire and a replica of Charlemagne's crown. Napoleon entered the ceremony wearing the laurel wreath and kept it on his head throughout the proceedings. The wreath symbolized victory, peace, and civic virtue. For the crowning of the emperor, Napoleon raised the Charlemagne crown over his own head in a symbolic gesture. After the crown was placed on his head, everyone in the Notre Dame Cathedral stood up spontaneously, the men waving their feathered hats. Hostilities with the British meant France faced the War of the Third Coalition by 1805. Napoleon crushed the coalition with victories in the Ulm campaign and the Battle of Austerlitz, which led to the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire. In 1806, the Fourth Coalition took up arms against the French Empire. Napoleon defeated Prussia at the battles of Jena and Auerstedt, marched the Grand Army into Eastern Europe, and defeated the Russians in June 1807 at Friedland, forcing the defeated nations of the Fourth Coalition to accept the treaties of Tilsit. 2 years later, the Austrians challenged the French again during the War of the Fifth Coalition, but Napoleon left no doubt over his right to rule Europe after triumphing at the Battle of Wagram. In an effort to extend the continental system, his embargo against Britain, Napoleon invaded the Iberian Peninsula and declared his brother Joseph the King of Spain in 1808. Led by the brilliant Duke of Wellington, the Spanish and Portuguese fought back in the Peninsular War, which ended in defeat for Napoleon's marshals. Napoleon launched an invasion of Russia in the summer of 1812. The resulting campaign witnessed the catastrophic retreat of Napoleon's Grand Army. In 1813, Prussia and Austria joined Russian forces in a sixth coalition against France, resulting in the defeat of Napoleon at the Battle of Leipzig. The coalition invaded France and captured Paris, forcing Napoleon to abdicate in April 1814. He was exiled to the island of Elba, which lies between Corsica and Italy. In France, the Bourbons were restored to power, bringing an end to the French Empire. Napoleon managed to make a daring escape from Elba in February 1815, and within weeks was back in power as the Emperor of France. Napoleon's forces fought two coalition armies, commanded by the British Duke of Wellington and the Prussian Prince Blucher, at the Battle of Waterloo on the 18th of June 1815. Wellington's army withstood repeated attacks by the French and survived through the day. The Prussian cavalry would prove the deciding factor, smashing through Napoleon's right flank and sealing defeat for the emperor. Napoleon returned to Paris and found that both the legislature and the people had turned against him. Realizing that his position was untenable, he abdicated on the 22nd of June in favor of his son. He left Paris 3 days later and settled at Josephine's former palace in Malmaison, about 11 miles west of Paris. The coalition forces quickly swept through France, arriving in the vicinity of Paris on the 29th of June, with the stated intent of restoring Louis XVIII to the French throne. When Napoleon heard that Prussian troops had orders to capture him dead or alive, he fled to Rochefort, hoping to escape to the United States. British ships were blocking French ports and Napoleon was eventually forced to surrender to Captain Frederick Maitland on HMS Bellerophon on the 15th of July 1815. The British exiled Napoleon to the remote island of St. Helena in the Atlantic, where he died in 1821 at the age of 51. In 1840, Louis-Philippe I obtained permission from the British government to return Napoleon's remains to France. His casket was opened to confirm that it still contained the former emperor. Despite being dead for nearly 2 decades, Napoleon had been very well preserved. On the 15th of December 1840, a state funeral was held. The horse-drawn hearse proceeded from the Arc de Triomphe down the Champs-Élysées to St. Jerome's Chapel, where it remained until the tomb designed by Louis Visconti was completed. In 1861, Napoleon's remains were entombed in a sarcophagus of red quartzite in the crypt under the dome at Les Invalides. Napoleon had an extensive impact on the world, bringing modern reforms to the lands he conquered in Europe. He remains one of the most famous and remarkable figures in history.